It was early in the 21st century when humans found that technology had begun to release their hidden potential. Potential they weren't even sure that they had. Potential that had been hidden, suppressed, kept away from them. And when this potential began to release itself, it devastated them at first. Almost all their leaders' lies, corruption, and crimes were dispersed to the general public, which did not take this well, especially when those that had this new ability came with receipts. The leaders, of course, tried to fight this by, fighting, sending teams to stop those who could actually discover things that could no longer be hidden, no matter how many times they tried to destroy it. And at first, this worked, and it worked well. However, just like putting the lid on a pot that's boiling, this could not be stopped, and a wave of cymatic humans began to emerge, and, for their own safety, went public. As the general public began to turn against those that had subdued them, the ones that kept them in bondage, in chains, kept them as dumb as possible, the cymatic personnel began to teach others how to awaken. Using their abilities, they started to cleanse the body to allow the circuits to actually fire, allow them to do things that they didn't even believe was possible. However, this did scare many of them. It made a few worries, and some, they only got partially through the training and said, "No, I can't. I mentally cannot do this," which is to be accepted. Of course, only those that had open minds could even attempt to do this, meaning that those that could not see past their own culture would fail, and fail hard, sometimes simply bleeding out the eyes, ears, nose, and even mouth at the same time as they tried to push through these barriers. However, the barriers would slam shut on themselves and cause all sorts of synaptic dangers. A few closed cultures, the ones who were wealthy and or powerful, or sometimes even not, began to get hostile, believing that they were going to be left behind, thought they would be the new slave. Though assured over and over and over again, these close cultures didn't care. They believed that if they could not have these abilities, then no one should, and they came out swinging and firing, and many were destroyed in the infighting, most caught in the crossfire between the cymatics and those that worked with them, and those that wanted to destroy the cymatics, usually being aided by the former leadership, and those with all the money but now none of the power. Their own jealousy, their own pride was their downfall. When the dust settled and the bodies were buried, the closed cultures barely held on to anything at all. Most of them had been completely annihilated, so the few that were there simply retreated. From then on, humanity focused on healing itself, healing its wounds, healing the planet, and healing everything from so much violence and destruction that scattered all the way across the planet, even down to the southern pole where everybody believed that Semitic powers would be enhanced. The entire continent was now red with blood. And eventually, everything would calm down and there was peace. And after which, a few decided that they would begin reaching out in earnest to their neighbors in space. When they did this, they found different cultures, different beings. They would look in and monitor these beings. They would look at their technology. They would look at their culture, their language. And sometimes, just sometimes, if they were strong enough, they would begin to mess with the new species. The species, it didn't matter if it was mammalian, amphibian, reptilian, avian, aquatic even. It did not matter. A few of the humans, and this number began to grow more and more over time, even though it was considered not only rude, but something that you would get your ass kicked for doing. They would simply go in and mess with the mind. They would show themselves as though they're an apparition, a fart in the wind, if you would, moving around, scaring the living crap out of a few of these creatures, not knowing what they were looking at. Sometimes they would make it so that everyone could see them, using their own cymatic abilities to broadcast themselves, enough that they could actually be seen on video. Most decide to stick with the dreams, going into the dreams and watching, listening. But sometimes they would mess with them just a little bit. Especially if this species would lucid dream, they would go into this dream, sometimes changing their own form to match this species and making that dream not just lucid, but moist and enjoyable. However, a few decided that they would go into the old ways, and they would sit there and simply sit on a few of these, laughing as these creatures struggled. Others would hold them down. Others would lift them up, scaring everyone. Sometimes they would even simply produce themselves next to the sleeping creatures, sit on the bed and watch. This many times freaked out the creatures. Some didn't know what was going on. Some jumped out of the water. Some jumped into the air. Some jumped backwards. But they all jumped. They didn't know what was going on. It always frightened these creatures what was going on. But every single time, if there was any communications, they would hear in their own language, "Don't worry, it's just a dream." A few of the humans that had been using their own abilities to live for so long cared very little for the physical contact. However, let's just say somebody needs a dopamine hit every once in a while. So it would be noted that when they were sitting there, watching one of these creatures enjoy some sort of comedy, where they would be laughing in a way that is almost painful to the human ears, they would sit there and basically tickle these creatures to make them laugh even harder, laughing so hard that their sides hurt, trying to make things better, sometimes even watching over them, and especially the young. It is important that the young reach adulthood so they can live full lives, so they can begin to grow, to increase the own technology of their species, to begin to reach out to the stars as well. A few would block certain items from falling on these children, maybe pushing the young ones out of the way, sometimes following a certain creature around, making sure they don't get struck, making sure that their number comes up during a drawing, something of that nature. But each time, a human would come out of their trance, thinking, "That was fun, but I haven't moved like in a few hours, and that was basically just a dream, but a lucid dream. But the lucid dreams that these cymatic humans were having would reach out well beyond what anyone was able to reach with physical abilities. This became a favorite pastime of humanity, especially since humanity using cymatics no longer aged. They didn't have to worry about time itself. When they were back on their own planet, on Earth, they would just do things to make sure they could survive. They would not damage the planet at all. They would just do things to make sure they survived, and they would go out into the universe in their own time, through their own cymatic minds, and maybe cause a little mischief, sometimes protect. It depended on who. And in each culture, they called these images, these experiences, something else entirely. However, there was always one word, one call out in each of these species. It was always different. Sometimes it sounded like a chirp, sometimes a growl, sometimes an actual formed word, something like they were given something in their own language. However, this was enough to break the connection, to force them back. Everyone wondered what these actually meant. And if you were to read the minds of these creatures, well, that would be something. But reaching out is one thing. Being able to jump inside their own soul is another. And as Earth's population fully stabilizes, And they have no interest in actually building rocket engines to reach out into space. Now that they can reach out with their minds, it is now just a dream. Just a dream to fly on these ships out into the middle of space to meet these new species. It is just a dream to go and live on another planet. Why? When you can visit it with your own mind. It's just a dream to go and find those very pretty or hunky or whatever you're into type of alien and have a little bit of fun. Why would you go out and do that physically when you can do it in your mind? Though there is the balance of all things, even though humanity can live indefinitely now, using their own cymatics, of course, they have to not get too attached to any particular being whose life will end and head into a plane that humanity can see but is not willing to cross. They think of each of those they've helped, those that they've, in their mind, shared time with, those that they've protected. And as those memories fade, sometimes humanity would think of them as just a dream. But you can't dwell on that. Every single cymatic human still reaches out to each of the species. And now, as some of those species do physically reach out into the stars with their own ships, they look to see that these species are all being drawn towards Earth itself, towards our solar system. And humanity all share this knowledge. Everyone checks and double checks and they verify it. And sure enough, they realize that everything they believed would not happen through the physical plane might just happen. They might actually be able to physically meet the new species. They might be able to shake their hand, to give them a hug, or in some cases, do other things with them to bring as much pleasure as possible. They might be able to even extend more of human technology, even though humanity has basically stolen all the technology, but technology always expands. Now they realize that since our cymatics ever started, it might take a century, it might even take 2. However, meeting our neighbors seems to be no longer just a dream. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this standalone story. Now before I go, I need to send out some big thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes, Sir Delta Tango 2 Whiskey Echo, SS Demon, Douglas Scarborough, MTF Guard, Sir Erica Gem, Brian Kemp, Julius Boone, and Guardian Sage. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.